Welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
And I'm Andrea Goyan. We used to do comedy together when we were 19.
But we lost touch.
And years later, we found each other and discovered
that I'm a painter, performer, writer, Pilates teacher, animal lover, and biologist.
Wait, I'm a painter, performer, writer, Pilates teacher, animal lover, and well, okay, I'm not a biologist, but we're
long lost friends.
And we're both speculative fiction writers.
And my work has appeared in Metastellar.
Metastellar, for those of you who don't know, is an online magazine. And we publish original science fiction, fantasy, and horror. There's a link below.
Today, we're delighted to once again be talking to Douglas Cole, who is a writer, a teacher, and an actor in Seattle, Washington. He's published a lot of poetry collections and short fiction, and his novel Whitefield just won the American Fiction Award in Urban Fiction and was a finalist in the thriller crime category. Today, we want to talk to him mostly about teaching writing and any tips, exercises he can share with us to help your writing career and your writing.
Yeah, and we were speaking about how we'd love to know any tips you might have specifically as we're talking about addressing writing kind of a thriller, how that kind of happens.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm there. Well, all writing, I think, begins with just reading. You've got to read. You've got to read a lot. If you want to write anything, you better start reading it. Like, I don't want to, well, Jim Harrison, the poet and novelist who, he said something funny about it. I think he said, you don't want to be that kid in the sandbox who says, look what I did. But when, it's been done thousands of times. So educating yourself to a genre, I suppose, which I say and then turn around and ironically look at myself because I don't tend to read a lot of thrillers or crime novels. Yet this book that I wrote ends up being in that category. But it comes to it somewhat honestly too. But at the same time, it wasn't written. I didn't write it to be in a particular genre or category. I was thinking more as literary. But when it came to the contest, when the publisher was sending it to the contests, that seemed an appropriate category to check as well, because it's got a crime in it and it's got a sense of danger. It gets to be a crime novel too. But other than that, yeah, I think that, and I just think any writer who wants to explore writing and create is naturally going to be interested in reading, right? You want to read and see what the people who've gone before you have done and how they do it, and dismantle their creations and look at the way the parts move and figure out how to make that yourself. So reading begins and ends with reading passionately, reading in that way where you disappear too, right? So there's that reading where I remember that first happening too, that glorious, like the great drug trip of reading. and then reading with a kind of a conscious eye to see what's good about this. Why do I like this? Asking those kinds of questions. What is it about this that makes it what I think of as a good piece of writing? And what can I learn from it? And I think that can be a process you continue and still enjoy. I just got through reading Haruki Murakami's The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. And I can enjoy it as a movie in my head that I'm having, and also annotate and write marginalia and kind of digest it and study it. So I think that's one of the best ways of all the kinds of practices, and we can talk more about, kinds of writing prompts and techniques and tools and toys. But I think that reading, just highly aware, conscious reading, is your best teacher.
Do you have your students do that then? Is that part of your class structure?
Oh, always. Begins and ends with reading. And I teach various levels of writing. And so I find that emphasizing the reading is an important part of it. Also, sometimes I will actually read to my students out loud, not necessarily assuming that they haven't done a lot of reading, but in order to maybe fill in that block so that reading can be then understood as something that has a real sound to it. You know, a lot of folks who don't read a lot maybe haven't encountered that element of the voice, and we talk a lot about that too, the voice in a piece of writing. And until you can really hear that, I don't know, you know, like reading somebody and you get to that point where you could probably identify that writer if somebody read a passage from one of his or her pieces of work, not identifying them, and you go, oh, I can recognize, I can hear that voice. I know that's Shakespeare. I know that's, you know, Louis Erdrich. I know, you know, and you know who it is just because you're familiar with the voice. Until you could be kind of familiar and have your ear sensitized that much, I don't know that you can sort of encounter and hear your own voice as well. I think that's a necessary process. And I think kind of finding that passion and finding that ability to really dissolve into reading, ironically, is a way to clarify your perception of your own voice and create a style or create your own sort of techniques.
Yeah. Do you read your own work aloud, Ben?
I do, poetry or prose, especially if I'm in a spot that feels like it's problematic. Maybe something's not working. I was just talking to my friend Chris Broberg about this today, as a matter of fact, that I think that the most beautiful writing, the writing I'm drawn to the most, is writing that is both beautiful on the page, maybe visually, if it's a poem, the line breaks are part of the structure. But regardless of necessarily how it just plain looks, I mean, how the words look in a string or how the words go together, how that works visually, and it does. You know, writing is a beautiful visual medium as well. We don't really think of it as much, but it is. But a part of what I think is the most beautiful element of writing is when it's beautiful looking, the words are flowing and your eyes are following it, and that's a beautiful, but you can also kind of hear that voice. And if you were to speak it, it would come out of the mouth in a way that is graceful and fluid and lovely, not in a you know, syrupy musical way, but in a way that is that's so that, for example, you don't have unintentional log jams in the mouth of, you know, dental fricatives banging up against each other, something like that, use a linguistic term. But yes, I will read something out loud to hear where the sound is off, maybe, or to catch, you know, kind of get what is the rhythm and how do I get the rest of this passage to kind of harmonize right with it. So reading aloud is, I think, an important part of that process. Also, one of my writing teachers, friend of mine, Bruce Beasley, he said, you've always got to take your work through the crap detector, or no, he said the cringe factor. You want to get it past the cringe factor. So not only read it out loud, he said, hang a piece of it on the refrigerator so it's public. And you're looking at it too, and you go, ooh, do I want anybody else? But reading aloud, definitely, yes, that's a great way to test the tensile strength of the language and its beauty, its harmonics. And that's, I feel like for me, that's really a kind of central pillar of good writing is both that marriage of meaning and sound, the music of it.
I always find that with reading out loud, when I do it alone in my room and I read it out loud, I usually don't find as many problem areas as if I read it for someone. So when I read it to someone, I'm always like, I wrote, oh God, that doesn't work. But reading on my own, I can kind of smooth it over a little. It's funny. It's just that little performance element changes it for me.
Me too. I find, I mean, when I have trouble reading aloud to myself, I have to have somebody, even if I know they're not really listening to me, and I have to bother them occasionally and say, are you listening? Did you hear what I said? Okay, but except for that, but it's like, I need sort of somebody there to make the performance, even if it's really just for me, I know. And then you catch mistakes and you hear things. And then of course, the more, well, I don't know, but maybe more poetry and more short fiction, it's even more that you want that perfection of language. Because in a novel, you know, maybe if you have a few stuff you could change, because you can't get, because perfection is so hard, right? So the smaller the piece, I guess, the more perfect it can be. Just like a person, like me, I'm small, very small, so I can be, you know.
And as Doug said in our previous conversation with him, it's perfect for that moment. And then when you come back months later, you think you could make it more perfect. So it's always a growth, it's a growth of yourself, you know.
Yeah.
Let me add, but you can come back to it even after you've said, oh, I could do it better, and go, you know what? It is good.
Yeah.
So that perspective.
That's true. That's true.
But even in writing a novel, like when I was working on the White Field, I was trying to make sure every paragraph, every sentence was at that highest level. And being a longer piece, you know, that density of the language, it's tougher. It's a bigger chore. It's a bigger chore, but I think it's equally, the effort is equal to try to reach that perfect pitch. Short story, poem, novel. I want to kind of get there.
So when you're teaching, what are some of your, you know, the things you like to get people doing? Say someone who's a newer writer who's trying to find their voice. What would you encourage them to do?
Well, sort of like that question you asked me before when I was talking about writing in Mrs. Sheridan's class, and I got into the sort of free writing thing. I think I ultimately really want to try to get students into that space of discovery in their writing. So I have them, they work on, you know, pieces, whether it's an essay or a short story or a piece of poetry, whatever I'm having them do. I also have them do a lot of free writing and journal writing. And I tell them that part of the reason for that process, a lot of times when people are free writing in journals, there's no grade attached to it. They will stumble or step into a beautiful writing moment. And so my point is, try to stay conscious as much as you are, again, using negative capability and just being in the moment and just writing, but also try to be conscious what's happening there. What happened when you got into the writing and it was flowing and it was beautiful and it was perfect and there was this marvelous marriage of sound and meaning, and it comes out and you've got this little jewel, and like, wow, I created that. So trying to become aware but not sort of knock yourself out of that space is a beautiful part of kind of getting a little more craft in your writing that doesn't, I think, become self-conscious or diminishes the beauty of it. So I have them do a lot of free writing in that way. That's an important part, I think, to sort of get into a place where you are part of the instrument of the language.
And so, like, say you had somebody, okay, you're having them do free writing, but they're like, I don't know what to write about, dude. What do you say?
Look at the wall.
I was gonna say that too. Look at the wall and describe it.
Grab whatever you see, the bird out the window, you know. I mean, that's if we're in a classroom and we're doing it as an exercise. There are other things I suggest doing, of course, if you're in the freedom of your own home. You know, you've got so many more options. You got options all over the place. But even in a classroom, if we have books, we have writing, there's other techniques I like to have them use as well.
You want to share a couple?
That was my pregnant pause. Did you?
I thought so. I was like, would you like to ask me?
Yeah, I was fishing. I find some fun things to do that I offer to students, to read, and then as you're reading, keep a piece of your brain awake and aware to a word or a phrase or even a sentence that you think is beautiful, and then pluck that out and use that as the first piece of expression to you writing something. And then you use that and you just kind of free write from there onward. And that's sort of a jazz sort of structure, to take the standard, play the standard, and then improvise off of it. And I think that's fun too, because that allows you to play a little bit with the voice and style of another writer, but then kind of like take it into your DNA and string it out, but also then sort of leave room for your own style and your own personality to take into a new direction. And so that's, there's a writer by the name of James Dickey, and he's got an interesting term for kind of that thing. He calls it double tongue. I've always liked that phrase, double tongue. so that you've got the original writer and you got that thing, then you sort of parallel your own into it. That's one of the things I'll have students do. And then that can be incorporated with another technique I called it. I stole this one actually from William Smith, Bill Smith. He used to teach at Western Washington when I was a grad student there. And he gave us this technique that I've always used in writing classes that I think is great. It's called looping. And so you'll free write from whatever, you know, initial trigger or prompt, or just from your own, and then stop, just kind of free write for a certain period of time, like free write for 30 seconds or a minute, then stop, then look into the piece you just wrote and find a word, a phrase, or a sentence that you love. Take that out and use that as the prompt to do the next timed piece. That looping is a way to not only practice the free writing using some kind of tangible, concrete piece, but also it helps to train your eye to writing in relational ways, so that you can kind of like create connections, transitional between one piece to another, and using that little passage in a creative way, but even in a more sort of rhetorical way. So the looping exercise is always fun. I recommend people do that one.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
That one sounds great. Do you like working with younger, newer writers? I don't mean younger age-wise, I just mean newer to the process. Do you find that that's a challenge and interesting, or do you like working with people who have more under their belt? Do you have a preference? Oh, maybe you can't say because you don't want to hurt anyone.
I don't want to make my future students feel
uncomfortable.
Being a little uncomfortable is okay, though. You know, so I say I like working with the more polished practice ones. The newcomers will, I better do a little work. I better work out before I come. No, I'm kidding. There are beautiful elements to both. The untutored, you know, new to the experience writers sometimes have amazing luck or internal, you know, abilities, and they just kind of, stuff will pop out and it's just like, it's just so beautiful, and it doesn't have the echo of anything that they've read or done before, and there's this kind of like freshness and beauty to it, and yet at the same time working with students who have read quite a bit or done some writing before, there's something beautiful about the kind of the depth and the complexity that they can sometimes reach. And then my ability to kind of dialogue with them is enhanced because we have more vocabulary to work with. You know, we can refer to more writers and particular kinds of vocabulary for the structure of the writing. I think that they both are beautiful. If I have a frustrating experience with writing students, it's those maybe who are in the middle, who read a little bit and they've just kind of said, I've read enough. and then they become prima donna. And they're just like, everything I create, I will never revise anything. It's beautiful as is. You know? But you know, I can disabuse them pretty quickly too. I try not to do that. But yeah, I think that I love the fresh new writers and the way that there is just this kind of sparkle to what they're doing. But I also like the writers who've done some reading and writing, because then they can kind of do things that a new writer can't, you know, references to other allusions and things like that, which those are always fun elements to see in a developing writer's work too.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been, I mean, so many good ideas and so many fun things to try, like the looping thing is.
I love the looping. That's new to me.
So, as we always end, what's the best thing you learned this week? Anybody want to go first, or is that me?
I'll go first, just to shake things up. Live science again. They had an article about capybaras in Argentina taking over a gated community. So they have hundreds of these. For those of you who don't know, the world's largest rodent, they're around 170 pounds. They look like giant guinea pigs. They're adorable. And they're just kind of taking over this place and pooping everywhere and eating all the food, all the, you know, the lawns and the whatever the plants are. And apparently they built this on top of a swampland that used to be their home. So they're just really kind of saying it's ours. And
I love that. I love that. I met a capybara in Belize once, and it was recovering, I guess. So it was still in this, it wasn't yet quite wild. And I went in and it played with me and it ate a big hole in my jeans.
see, practice for when they go into the Argentinian place and they have to eat everything, take it back.
It's like, let's see. So now we know what denim is like. Good. They were
I assume their teeth continue to grow like other rodents, so they have to kind of keep munching.
yeah, yeah. And it was very cute and friendly, but I was like, I did pull back because I didn't want it to keep going through the jeans into the leg.
Right.
And become a carnivorous capybara, which would be maybe a capybara. Haha. Okay, that was so funny. Yes. Okay, the best thing I learned this week, if you're like 60, maybe even like 55 and over, studies have shown that people in that age group tend to dream in black and white about 25% of the time because they grew up with black and white TVs, but the younger people who grew up only with color apparently only dream in color. So I thought that was really interesting, though I don't really see how they could know that. I mean, how do you know 25? I mean, that seems like how could you find that out? But still, I assume there's some truth that is kind of interesting to that.
Pretty cool.
Interesting. What if you've never watched TV?
I don't know. Maybe you don't dream at all. Maybe you just dream words. If you've only read, it's like this long novel you have to. I have dreamt whole novels in my sleep. I mean, I couldn't like write them, but it was like a whole, like some, this thing about generations of people. And I woke up, I was like, wow, that was a novel.
Something I discovered. Like I mentioned, I was reading Haruki Murakami's book, The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. Well, I just finished it, and it's 600 pages long. I picked it up, I think, fully ready to take on that relationship, because a book that long is going to be with me for a while. And one of the things I discovered from reading it was this interesting passage. Part of the detail of the story is this well. This character discovers a well, and it's a dry well. And that connects into a lot of other references in the story to a block in flow. There's not flow. There's like this kind of like this desert kind of landscape quality to the story. I think kind of like dry and water is an important thematic element of it. And the character is experiencing a similar kind of drought, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, in his relationships, in his life too. And so this character talks to another character who says that in life, when you're in that moment where the flow is not happening, you just got to do nothing. In other words, you can't just run around trying to find out how to fix it, or what to do about it and how to kind of handle it. That you just there's this. I read it almost as kind of a Zen sort of sensibility. You just got to be in it when it happens, which is a great, beautiful thing to learn. It's just when it's not flowing, just be in it.
Yeah.
Don't battle it.
That's nice.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for talking to us.
Yes,
thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you for having me here. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really is. And don't forget to check out Doug's links as well as his books, especially The White Field, which has won prizes and is just out waiting for you to explore it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, you too. Thank you.